Family barbecue turned tense when my cousin asked who I'm living off now, and no one corrected him. For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard him, like the smoke and the noise and the clatter of tongs against the hot plate had warped the words into something uglier than they were. But then he grinned, wide, slow, pleased with himself, and lifted his beer like he'd just delivered the line of the day. The circle of relatives around the outdoor table did that weird half-laugh people do when they're checking if they're allowed to laugh. My aunt's mouth pulled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. My dad kept turning sausages as if the question had nothing to do with me. My mom stared at the tray of potato salad like she could rearrange it into a different reality. The flies kept landing on the watermelon, and nobody moved to shoo them away. I could feel my face get hot in a way that wasn't the sun, and my hands, holding a cheap paper plate that was already sagging in the middle, went suddenly damp. I stood there with my plate tilted, watching a smear of barbecue sauce crawl toward the edge, thinking, if I answer, I'm dramatic. If I don't, he wins. Come on, my cousin said, too loud, leaning back in his chair so the plastic creaked. I'm just asking. Last time it was Mom and Dad. Then it was your ex, now what? Roommates? Government? Some poor girl you've convinced you're between things? He did air quotes with his sticky fingers, and I watched them glisten in the light. Someone snorted. It might have been my uncle. It might have been my little brother, trying not to. It all blended into the same sound. Permission. My cousin's eyes stayed on me, bright and hungry, like he'd been waiting for the moment I walked in. I looked around the table, expecting, stupidly, as if I hadn't lived in this family my whole life. Someone to say, that's not fair, or don't talk to him like that, or even just, hey mate, that's rude. But the only movement was my dad flipping a sausage and my aunt reaching for napkins. The silence had edges. It cut. It started with a text from Mom on Tuesday night. Barbecue at Leanne's Sunday. Everyone's coming. Please come too. Grandma will be there. That last sentence was the hook. Grandma doesn't do big gatherings much anymore. She gets tired and overwhelmed, and she has this tiny tremor in her left hand now that she tries to hide by keeping it in her lap. I hadn't seen her properly in months because I've been avoiding the family, because every visit felt like walking into a room where everyone had already agreed who I was. The sensitive one, the unstable one, the wasted potential, the one people could talk about like a cautionary tale without ever asking what it felt like to be the tale. I told myself I could handle one afternoon, a couple of hours, show up, hug Grandma, eat something, leave before anyone got too comfortable. I pulled up outside my aunt's place at 12:06, already late enough to feel my stomach tighten. There were cars crammed along the curb, shiny new ones with tinted windows and those personalized number plates that always scream money without saying it. I parked 2 streets over because my car is a dented little thing with sun-faded paint and a rattly indicator, and I didn't want the jokes to start before I'd even walked through the gate. I carried a 6-pack of soft drinks because I didn't know what else to bring that wouldn't feel like I was auditioning for their approval. The air smelled like hot grass and charcoal. Someone had music playing inside, some clean, upbeat playlist that never matches the messy reality of family gatherings. When I opened the side gate, the sound of laughter hit me first. The kind of laughter that makes you feel like you've missed the joke and it's probably about you. My cousin Callum was already there, of course. He always is. He's 32 and still lives like the center of his own universe. He's the type who talks about hustle while his parents quietly keep topping up his bank account. He's charming when there's an audience and cruel when he's bored. He sees family events as a stage. He's also the golden boy in a different way from my brother. Callum isn't responsible or steady, but he's confident, and confidence is a currency my family mistakes for character. Callum spotted me the second I stepped into the backyard, and his eyebrows lifted like he'd just been handed a new toy. "Look who made it," he called across the lawn. A couple of heads turned. I gave a small wave that felt pathetic the moment I did it. Mom came over and hugged me with one arm while still holding a serving spoon in the other. Her hug was quick, distracted, like she was hugging a task she just ticked off. "Thanks for coming," she murmured into my shoulder. "Just keep it light today, okay?" There it was. The job assignment. Keep it light. Don't ruin it. Don't start. I nodded because nodding is my default survival response. Grandma was sitting under the shade of the pergola, a wide-brimmed hat on her head and a little paper fan in her hand. When she saw me, her face softened in that way that always breaks me open a little. She reached for my hand and squeezed it, her grip surprisingly strong. "There you are," she said, and it wasn't accusing. It was relief. "I'm here," I said, and I meant it like a promise. Then I stood up and turned, and Callum was right there, blocking my path like he timed it. He clapped my shoulder too hard. "How's life?" he asked, voice bright. "Still figuring things out?" I smiled. The kind of smile you use when you're trying to keep a dog from biting you. "Yeah," I said, "working on it." Callum nodded exaggeratedly. "Love that for you," he said, and I could already feel the afternoon sharpening. By the time he asked the question, the living off now question, I'd already been clipped by a dozen little remarks. Aunt Leon asking if I'd finally sorted myself out. Uncle Steve offering me a job at the warehouse like he was giving alms. My dad telling someone I was between jobs in that casual tone that makes it sound like I'm perpetually between jobs, like I live in the hallway of my own life. And Callum, circling. I've been laid off 6 months ago. Not because I was lazy, not because I couldn't handle it. My company downsized. My entire team got cut. I'd taken the redundancy and done what you're supposed to do. Applied, interviewed, followed up, watched polite rejection emails pile up like leaves. I'd also left my ex around the same time, because living with someone who made you feel like a burden in private doesn't get easier just because the world is already doing it in public. I moved into a share house with 2 friends from uni. I paid rent. I paid bills. I cooked my own food. I was getting by. Barely sometimes, but I was getting by. My family knew some of that. They just didn't want to. In my family, your story isn't what you tell. It's what they repeat. So when Callum asked who I was living off now, it wasn't a question. It was a headline. I stood there beside the outdoor table, paper plate bending, smoke stinging my eyes, and I tried to find a response that wouldn't hand him exactly what he wanted. My brain did that frantic scan. Joke it off? Shut down? Walk away? Fight? Every option had a consequence. I could already hear Mum later. "Why did you react? Why couldn't you just ignore him? You know how he is." I could already see Dad's face. Disappointment mixed with annoyance, like my emotions are a mess on his clean patio. My mouth opened, closed, open again. "I'm not living off anyone," I said finally, and my voice sounded steadier than I felt. "I pay rent. I work casual shifts. I'm looking for full-time." Callum's grin widened. "Casual shifts," he repeated, like he was tasting the phrase. "At what? The please feel sorry for me store?" Someone laughed again. It wasn't even loud, but it landed like a slap. My dad didn't look up. He just kept cooking. The sausage sizzled. The sound felt obscene. "That's enough?" I heard quiet. It was my brother, Ethan. He was standing a little behind Mom, holding a plate for Grandma. His jaw was tight. Callum turned slightly, still smiling. "Oh, mate," he said, mock sincere. "Don't get protective. I'm just asking. We all worry about him." He pointed at me with his beer, like I was a topic on a panel. Mom made a tiny distressed noise. "Callum, she started, but it came out weak, like she didn't want to commit." Dad snorted, still not turning around. "Can we not do this?" he said, but it wasn't aimed at Callum. It was aimed at the discomfort, at the scene, at the air changing. Callum leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Seriously, though," he said, voice dropping slightly like he was doing me a favor by being real. "At some point, you've got to admit, maybe you're the common denominator. People don't just keep needing support unless there's something off, you know? Like, you're a good bloke, but you're high maintenance." High maintenance. That phrase made my stomach twist, as if needing basic kindness is a luxury expense. I looked at Mom. She stared at the table. I looked at Dad. He was still cooking, jaw clenched, refusing eye contact like if he didn't meet my eyes, he didn't have to choose. I looked at Aunt Leanne. She was watching with that tight little smile, the one she uses when she's glad I'm being put in my place, but doesn't want to look cruel. I looked at Grandma. Her face had gone still, her fan motion slowing. It hit me then, sharp, sudden, that Callum wasn't the real problem. Callum was the mouth. The problem was the room. the room that stayed silent. I set my plate down on the edge of the table carefully so it wouldn't tip. My hand was shaking, and I hated that my body always tells on me. Why would you ask me that? I said, and my voice cracked slightly on the last word, which made Callum's eyes gleam. He loves a crack. He loves a weakness. Because it's true, Callum said, shrugging. Like, come on. We're family. We can say things. Ethan stepped forward a half step. Family doesn't talk like that, he said, louder this time. Dad finally turned around. Ethan, he said sharply, warning in his voice. Drop it. Ethan's face flushed. Why? He demanded. Why does he get to say that? Because you're making it a thing, Dad snapped. It's a joke. I stared at Dad. It's not a joke to me, I said quietly. Dad's eyes flicked to mine for a second, just long enough to register annoyance, and then away again. You always take everything personally, he said, like he was reading from script. That phrase. I'd heard it my whole life. The moment you say you're hurt, you're accused of being too sensitive. The moment you ask for respect, you're told you're making drama. Callum sat back, satisfied. See, he said, waving his hand like he'd proven something. This is what I mean. Grandma spoke then, and her voice was small but clear. Callum, she said. Everyone paused, because Grandma speaking always changes the temperature. Callum turned, smile still on. Yeah, Nan. Grandma's eyes were tired, but they didn't waver. Apologize, she said. Callum blinked. What? He said, laughing lightly like she was teasing. I said apologize, Grandma repeated. That was cruel. Callum glanced around the table, searching for backup. Mom didn't look up. Dad's mouth tightened. Aunt Leanne shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke. Callum's smile thinned. It was banter, he said. He knows I'm joking. Grandma's hand tightened around her fan. No, she said. You were enjoying it. The words hung there, honest and ugly. Callum scoffed. Oh, come on, he said, rolling his eyes. Everyone's acting like I stabbed him. Grandma looked at me then, and her gaze was gentle in a way that made my throat burn. Are you all right? She asked. I swallowed. My tongue felt thick. No, I admitted. I'm not. Mum's head snapped up like the word had slapped her. Don't, she whispered, not to Callum. To me. Like my honesty was the dangerous thing. Dad exhaled hard. For God's sake, he muttered, and he turned back to the barbecue like he could hide behind sausages. Something in my chest went very still. Not calm, just final. I'm going, I said. Mum's eyes widened, instantly panicked. No, don't do this, she hissed, voice tight. Not here. Callum smirked. There he goes, he said, smug. Run away. Ethan turned toward me. Hey, he said softly, like he wanted to anchor me. I shook my head slightly, not trusting myself to speak. If I spoke, I'd cry. If I cried, they'd call me sensitive. If I was sensitive, Callum would win again. I grabbed my phone and my keys from the chair where I'd put them. Mum stood up quickly and caught my arm, fingers digging into my skin. Please, she whispered, eyes shiny. Please don't embarrass us. There it was, the real truth. Now don't get hurt. Now I'm sorry. Just don't make us look bad. I looked at her hand on my arm and gently pulled away. You're not embarrassed by what he said, I said quietly. You're embarrassed by me reacting. Mum's mouth trembled. I'm just trying to have a nice day, she whispered. And I'm trying to not be humiliated, I replied. Dad snapped. Stop being dramatic, without even turning. I felt Ethan shift beside me, like he might say something again, but I didn't want him punished for defending me. I didn't want him pulled into my role. So I turned and walked out through the side gate, my heart pounding, my vision too bright. The street outside was quiet, almost offensively normal. Sun on bitumen, a dog barking 2 houses down. Somewhere, aqui riding a scooter. I stood on the footpath for a second and just breathed like my lungs didn't know what to do without the pressure of that backyard. My phone buzzed before I reached my car. Mom, please come back. You're making this worse. Dad, grow up. Aunt Leanne, you can't keep running from feedback. Callum, told you. Hard work, mate. It done. I'm sorry. I'm proud of you for leaving. Are you okay? I sat in my car with the door still open and stared at the messages until they stopped looking like words and started looking like shapes. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. My throat hurt in that way it does when you've swallowed too much for too long. I drove home, not dramatically, not speeding, just leaving, like a person allowed to remove themselves from a room where they're being treated like entertainment. When I got back to my share house, my roommates were in the kitchen making iced coffee. One of them looked up and immediately went, "You're early." I nodded and tried to speak. My voice came out thin. "Family thing," I said. My roommate didn't pry. He just handed me a glass of water. That small act, no jokes, no commentary, just water, made my eyes sting. Later that night, Ethan called. His voice was low. "Mom's crying," he said. "Yeah," I replied, staring at the ceiling. "Dad's angry," Ethan added. "Yeah." Ethan was quiet for a second, then said, "Callum told everyone you can't take a joke." I let out a small laugh that wasn't funny. "Of course he did," I said. Ethan's voice cracked slightly. "Nan's upset," he said. "She said she's sick of watching them do this to you." That hit me harder than all of it, somehow. Grandma seeing it. Grandma naming it. Grandma being tired of it. I swallowed and felt my throat tighten. "I don't know what to do anymore," I admitted. "I feel like if I stay, I'm their punching bag. If I leave, I'm the villain." Ethan exhaled. "You're not the villain," he said firmly. "You're just the only one who doesn't pretend it's normal." After we hung up, I lay there replaying the moment Dad laughed. Because he did laugh, even if it was smaller than Callum's. The little snort. The dismissal. The way he sided with comfort over me. I kept thinking about Mom's words. "Don't embarrass us." I kept seeing Aunt Leanne smile. The way she turned cruelty into feedback. I kept hearing Callum's question like it was stamped into the day. And the worst part is how predictable it all was. I knew who would talk. I knew who would stay quiet. I knew who would turn it into my flaw. I still went anyway, because I want to see Grandma, and because some part of me still believes that if I show up enough, I'll eventually be treated like I belong. But sitting in my room, in the quiet, I realized something I've been avoiding. I'm not living off anyone, but I'm living off a hope that keeps starving me. I don't know what happens next. Mom will want to talk. That is really a negotiation. Me promising to be easier in exchange for them not saying the quiet part out loud. Dad will want an apology for disrespect. Callum will act like he did me a favor by being honest. And I'll be tempted, God, I'll be tempted to smooth it over, to make it lighter, to pretend it didn't hurt so I can keep a seat at the table. But I keep seeing Grandma's face when she told him to apologize. Not angry, just tired. Like she'd been watching the same play for years and finally couldn't stand the script anymore. And I keep thinking, if the price of being included is laughing along when someone asks who I'm living off now, if the price is swallowing humiliation so everyone else can relax, maybe the problem was never that I'm hard to love. Maybe the problem is that they only know how to love someone they can control.